to the Minecraft tutorial series. This is going to be part 7. In this part, we're going to be covering the surface. In the last part, we left off with a chunk. Let's go back to the overworld level. Okay, so last time we left off with this. We have our chunk generating from top to bottom. We have randomly generated or procedurally generated caves. And now we have to deal with the surface right here. So that's what we're going to be working on today, turning this into something more natural with some foliage as well. I won't be covering things like trees because I'm still figuring out how to make something in editor so that we can actually make kind of prefabs in data assets. So that way we don't have to manually put in the numbers for the scales, etc. for the different types of blocks, that we can just do it a bit more, a more streamlined process, I guess you could say. So let's get into changing this into something that's actually an actual map. So everything that we're going to be covering today is going to be inside of our get data asset by location in the chunk. There's going to be nothing anywhere else. Last time we said everything under 60 goes through this, and now we're just going to do the opposite, but everything above 60. So we're going to move this out of the way. There we go, so that we have a bit of space to work with. Most of the stuff we're going to use is this, the input pin to world. We're going to be using that as well. Move that here. So we're going to do this once again step by step. The first thing we want to do is we're going to want to say that we want to continue the caves that already exist. So how we're going to do that is we already have our cave noise right here. We're going to use that same cave noise, but unlike in the actual caves themselves here, where we put 0.15, we're going to try and increase that value so that there's less chance of the caves appearing, meaning that they will still be there, but they'll be less likely to appear above the surface. You can also, instead of this, what you could do is based on the Z, you could make a curve which scales based on the height, and that way you can control it more fluidly, I guess. But for the sakes of keeping this rather simple, we're just going to put 0.2 here, plug that into the condition. If it is true, we're going to say return empty. If it's false, we will put our grass block. So compile and save, and let's build that. Now if we wait a bit and eject, we should have, there we go, our chunk generated. Now if we go to the top, normally we should have some holes in here as well, but apparently not. So I'm gonna have to try that again. Oh, sorry. That's my bad. The reason is because of this. We just want the input pin. I made a mistake there. So actually I'm just going to copy this because we might need it after. Just plug that straight in and try again. There we go. Pause. Now that's generated. And normally at the top, we have our caves that keep going. So here it's a bit large. We can change the value to make it more adapted, but it's whatever you feel comfortable with. This is a bit much, but we're going to be modifying that in a second anyway. So let's say we want something a bit less likely. So if we put, I think 0.5, I believe, should make it less caves. If I'm not wrong, it could be the opposite. Yeah, so now we still do have some blocks here that are getting cut out, but it's a lot less. So obviously, I think something like 0.4 will do. It's a bit above, but not too much either. Next, what we need to do is we want to make our surface, because right now we have that big cube. We don't want that. What we want is we want to say, well, we want our noise that we have, I believe, here from our GM Minecraft. We have 3 noises. The first is cave, the second is mineral, and the third is surface. So we made that before. So we're going to use that surface as well to build and say, well, what height do we want to use? So if we want, we can actually go back to event graph, I believe right here, where we generated with this noise So this is something that we removed last time, but I told you to move to the side because we'll use it later. Now we're going to be using that. So we're going to pretty much redo what we had here. And that's going to kind of give us the maximum height. And that's where we're going to say, well, anything above this value can disappear. Anything below it should be dirt. And anything on that value should be a grass block. So we're just going to actually just copy this for now. So like this will do. And we're going to place it here for a second, because before we can actually do the rest, we need to actually make our data asset for dirt, because we don't have that. So duplicate the grass block. We'll call it dirt. And we will reset this back to white, and we will get our dirt texture. We will copy it, and we will paste it everywhere. Just like this. And then we can rename this to dirt as well. And now we have our dirt block. So the next thing we want is we want to have this noise. So we're going to have to make a slight modification to this as well later. But for now, we're just going to leave it here. And we're going to say anything that should be a grass block needs to be going through this first. What we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to take this noise. We're going to need to, with our world here, we're going to split this. We're going to get X and Y. And with this alone, what we'll be getting is 0 to 1. So even if we multiply this to snap it to grid, which we don't actually need here. So we're actually going to... Yeah, so sorry. We're going to, instead of what we had here, where we just got it to a vector, what we need is we need to then divide this by 100 again. And the reason we can't just do this by 100 is because we need to snap it to a grid. So, no, sorry. We can actually, what we can do simply is, stupid, just times 10. And then we want to snap it to a grid of 1. That should do the trick. And what we need to check is if at any point this, so our location plus what we'll say is, now this can be determined, we're going to modify this later when we start adding the different biomes, but for now we're just going to do the plains or forest biome if you want. And we're going to say if it is this value, so the noise, converted to a value of between like 1 and 10, if that plus 60, so no, 65, if the current noise, so if we get this pin right here, and we break and get the Z, if this Z is double equal to this, no, sorry, if it is inferior or equal to this, then we want to do a branch. And on that branch, on true, we'll use grass block, and on false, meaning we're superior or above, we will say none. Now this should work to clear up all those extra layers that we don't need. So I'm just going to try, because it's slightly different from what I have, so I just need to make some modifications on the fly. Yeah, so it did get rid of them, but the problem is it's not actually doing a nice cut that we want. Like it's not actually using the noise. Okay, so I figured out what the issue is, so I'm just gonna rebuild this from scratch so that everybody sees or has the final version properly. So we start off, we do need this. There's just one major difference, and the problem was, so we need to disconnect the to world, is that the to world by default is times 100, so it's for placing an object. But we here need actual coordinates, so we need to divide it back by 100. So I want to right click and convert this back to a float. 100, then we can split it and put the X and the Y in here. Then this should work now by doing the 10 times this, 10 and then snapping to 1. And with this, we then can do the check. So plus 65 is just that we have the height, because by default we don't have the height here. And just for actually testing, I did connect this to see how it would work, but now it's not. So if we now run this, it should work. Let's give it a try. Play, wait for it to load, eject, and it's right back to how it was before. So the reason it's not working is because I have grass block on both of these. So that's why. So If it is inferior or equal, we do want a grass block. Otherwise, we want it to be empty. So compile and save. And we wait. And now eject. And now we do indeed have an actual plane. We actually have different levels here. So we can stop the simulation. And now we can get to the next step. So what this does is it will actually give us the noise map, let's just say. In simple terms, it gives us a noise map with the height. So next what we want to do is we want to say, well, okay, if you are not inferior equal but double equal, then we want to use grass blocks. Now if you're inferior, so we're going to do another branch here, and we'll just simply grab this and say if you're inferior to this, we want to say use dirt blocks. So we're going to grab this and get our dirt block. And if not, on the last option, so on false, we'll say none. Because this means superior. So let's give that a try and see if it gives us the result we want. Pause it, and there we go. So right now we do indeed have our actual blocks like you would expect it. It is grass on the top, anything below becomes dirt. Now I'm not sure if we still have our caves anymore. So I don't know if that's just because of just this chunk. So let's try again. We'll try another one just to see if we did lose it or if we still have. No, so we still do have our caves. Now, one thing we can add, because right here we have an issue, and there as well. Right here, it's actually trying to make a cave. But because of what we did, we told it if it's below this, it should be dirt. So it doesn't matter whether there's a cave or not. But in reality, it's grass because it's exposed. So it should be grass. So to solve that, what we can do is we need to modify this whole thing a little bit here. So I'm just going to remove the old one here. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a branch right here. And this branch is going to be used to determine the grass blocks. So what we'll do is we'll just grab this here. And we are going to promote it to a variable right here. We will call surface. Or surface Z if you prefer, for surface level will do actually. So plug that in here. And what we're going to check is very, very simple. We're going to say if this, so if surface level right here is double equal to our Z level here, that means that we want to use grass. But there should be a second situation for this. And that situation is the block right above it a cave? And so to check that, very simply, we want to say or right here. If this happens, or our cave noise right here plus 1 on the Z, if this is the case, then we want to talk about returning grass. So right here, grass block. And so then obviously, if it isn't, meaning it is either a cave or it is superior or inferior, then we'll do the rest. So now let's check if we just have a basic cave. Actually, no, sorry. What we'll do is we will say, do we have this? So instead of inferior, what we'll do here is we will say inferior. So less than that. Then we will say you are dirt. So just here, return dirt. So like this. And finally, the last option right here is simply we return empty, I believe. So none here, plug that in. So now if it is above or if it is not the limit of the cave or not double equal, we should have empty. So normally that should by default mean also that it is the cave. No, I'm not sure about that. So no, sorry, we actually need to say and that this is not a cave. Like this. There we go. Now this is also one thing to note. You need to be sure that you have the same value here, or you won't get the same caves that you're testing. Let's just move this. So what this last one does is it checks whether we're below the surface, and if we are, and we're not trying to, and it's not a cave spot, then we put dirt, otherwise we put empty. So let's try that. And we pause, eject, and now we should have an issue apparently. I think I did it the wrong way, didn't I? No, sorry, yeah, that's wrong. If this is superior, not inferior. Go like this. Let's try that again. So that was the other way around, that's why we had the issue. There we go, eject. And if we go to the top, ooh, so that's an interesting structure, but that is not what we were trying to get. Ah, I see why. Oh yeah, sorry, and I think this is the reason. If the cave above, if this is a cave above, that's cool and all, but we need to make sure that the block where we're actually trying to generate is a cave, is not a cave, because if it is a cave, then we shouldn't do any items. And we also want this inferior or equal to surface. Sorry, this needs to be inferior or equal to surface level. Like this. And I believe that'll do the trick. Hope it does. I just stop going off script because that's kind of causing issues. Okay, that wasn't a good example. Let's have another look. There we go. So that seems to have done the trick. Yeah, so as you can see now, it notices that there's empty space above it, so that it places grass blocks here. So I believe that should do it. Let's have another look one last time just to make sure everything's correct. Just make sure that the caves are indeed functioning as we would like them to now. There we go, that's just a normal cave, nothing wrong. Okay, so it seems to be working. So as I mentioned here, the last things I needed to add is we need to make sure that the cave we're trying to place on is one that to have grass, sorry, it either needs to be the surface level itself, or it needs to be the surface level or below, and it needs to be attempting to make a cave above. Actually, to be fair, it doesn't need to be inferior or equal, it's to be inferior, because it's if it is on the surface, it would anyway be set with this. So right here, if the point above is air, meaning that it is valid and it's a bit of air above, the block above, and that we're not trying to place a cave right here, then we can do this. Now, the inferior needs to be used because otherwise we will place blocks in the air above the noise surface. And we can't have that because otherwise we have floating blocks like you just saw. So the last thing we can do, and so this is also part of the surface here, is we want to see if we want to put some foliage. Now, to check the foliage, we need to actually make another noise map. So that's the last thing we need to do. Inside of our game mode right here, we're going to make another noise. So copy and paste, plug this in, and we'll just make a new one right here by promoting to variable noise, and we'll just call this foliage noise. Now this is just going to be for the grass and not the actual trees. As I mentioned earlier, I'm still working on that, and I'm figuring out the best kind of way to do it. So that will probably come in a later part normally. For the foliage, what I used is a cubic fractal with the seed, obviously as usual, 0.6 on the frequency, and interpolation to linear. And I believe that is all that I changed. No, this was switched to 4. So make sure you change this to 4 as well. And in this case, this actually doesn't matter, but we'll just put it back to cell value. That's the default value for it. Now, back in our chunk now, we have that information. So let's go ahead and add some foliage. So what we'll do here, once again, we're going to get our foliage noise. That's what we're going to need. And we're going to check for get noise 2D. And if noise 2D is, once again, these values here, we're going to use our location. What we'll check for is if it is superior to 0.17, And you're probably wondering, well, we can't do a branch here, and not properly at least, because if we do a branch, we don't actually have the possibility really to send a foliage thing, because we use the block transform. That's what we're creating with these. So we can't really pass through the foliage. So what we have to do is simply say, in either cases, we're going to return the grass block. But what we're going to do here on true, we're just going to simply say make foliage instance. And we're going to tell it to use, well, our foliage instance, which is the short grass. And we're going to tell it to spawn at this location, because we can just do this. That's not a problem. So what we want to do is we will say add instance. This, we will break the transform. And we're just going to grab our grass block here, place it, and just say it makes a grass block like normal. No issue there. And we just want to get our coordinates right here. And what we need to do is we need to convert these from coordinates to the actual world location, but we just want to do times 100. So we just want to turn this into a float times 100. But we also need to do a little offset here, because otherwise it will sometimes fall off cliffs. And we don't want that. We want it to be on the block. So we go just move those again. Plug this in. And we want to put 100 on the Y and 100 on the Z. So this is because of the actual foliage. Remember at the beginning, in the first part, I mentioned how the foliage was offset a bit on the fact that I made the model incorrectly. So this is just compensating for that. So if we now play, let it load and escape, we should now have some grass on the surface. There we go. So now we have some grass appearing. And that'll do it for this part. In the next part, we're going to be adding back the different, we're going to be adding the chunks again. Currently, we only have the one, so we're going to make it so that the player can spawn and that the different chunks appear around. And if there's time, we'll start implementing the logic for the biomes as well. So I hope you enjoyed this part. It was a bit of a mess because for some reason my project wasn't working for this one, so I had to make some changes on the go. But I hope you enjoyed anyway. I'll see you in the next part. Goodbye.